It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will live as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will live as one.
I know. I get tangled up. Hello. I had to wear my John Lennon shirt today. Welcome and Happy New Year. Hopefully for everybody. My name is Betty Custer, and I serve on the Board of Trustees of the Unitarian Universalist Church. It is my delight to welcome members, friends, and visitors this morning, whether you are here in person with us or joining us virtually. This is a welcoming congregation where everyone is welcome, just as we each are. Allow me to share a few brief announcements, more brief than most. The next meeting of our Social Justice Council will be Wednesday, January 5th at 7 p.m. Everyone is welcome to attend these meetings. We want you to find a way to be a part of all that we are doing together. Details for joining the meeting are in the happenings and also in the Unison, or you can speak to our Social Justice Chair, Alice Sutton. Both our hospitality and greeter teams are seeking new members. If you would like to learn more or sign up, please speak with Pam for hospitality or Deb Williams for greeters. We will hold a Path to Membership class on Sunday, January 9th, next Sunday, following the morning service. If you are interested in learning more about UUCS or would like to join our congregation, please speak with Membership Chair Deb Williams and join us on January 7th. Where is Deb? Way in the back right there. We have truly enjoyed the beautiful poinsettias given by Mary and Don Miles. With the end of the holidays, we have the 5 poinsettias on the ground that need a home. Please come up after the service if you are interested. Thank you all for making this a place of warmth and welcome. May we make it even more so for every person we meet in this new year. We are glad you are here today.
Well, thank you, Betty. And good morning again, and Happy New Year's to everybody, to all of you here in the sanctuary, and all of you here with us virtually. My name is Ruth Stanton, and I'm your worship associate today. Our minister, Scott Neely, is out of the pulpit today and will be back next week. We have a special service to kick off the new year to learn about the South Carolina UU Social Justice Alliance. That's SCUJA for short, and we love these interesting abbreviations, so think SCUJA. Our guest speaker is the Reverend Dr. Pippin Whitaker. She is the affiliated community minister at the UU Congregation of Columbia and the executive director of the South Carolina UU Justice Alliance, or that famous SCUJA. Dr. Rev Pippin and colleague Dr. Jean Harriott co-founded SCUJA in 2021 to build an alliance of South Carolina Unitarian Universalists acting for justice in partnerships that center the voices and authority of people experiencing injustice, especially BIPOC, LGBTQ, immigrant, and houseless people. Rev Pippin also serves as co-chair of the Commission on Social Witness of the Unitarian Universalist Association. To UU Community Ministry, she brings extensive experience in community and organizational change to prevent violence and build anti-oppressive communities. Rev. Dr. Pippin holds a PhD in social work and a Master of Social Work with a focus in nonprofit administration and policy from Florida State University in Tallahassee. And she also holds a Master of Divinity from Meadville Lombard Theological School, which is an anti-oppressive, justice-focused divinity school in Chicago, Illinois. She now lives in Chapin with her spouse, Steve, and their 3 kids, along with 2 dogs, a cat, and some fish. She enjoys time with her family when she has not busy doing all of this wonderful stuff, running, playing the piano, cooking, mostly healthy food, and reading and admiring the outdoors. And we are so very pleased to welcome the Reverend Dr. Pippin Whitaker today.
Thank you, Ruth, for that warm welcome. Thank you, everybody else. It is a joy to be here. It's a joy to start the year here. And I'll say more about why I'm so grateful for the Spartanburg UU Church. Let us begin with a centering chalice lighting. These words are by Karen Johnston. Do not be alone right now. Do not be alone right now. Gather together. Gathering together grows courage in ourselves and in others who see those numbers swelling. It's a small thing, but right now it's an important thing. Great sources of wisdom remind us, just because you can't stem the tide of all hate, it's still right to do the thing that you can. These things add up. Your thing, my thing, his thing, their thing, her thing, together it becomes a big thing. Do not be alone right now. any liberation. All liberation is collective liberation. I'll say it again. All liberation is collective liberation. My freedom is bound up with yours and yours with mine inextricably. So let us together cast our lots doing this big thing, bending the moral arc of the universe towards justice.
As we sing of hope and joy today, some know only anguish and despair. How can we lift our voices in this way while some have pain and misery to spare? If a crumbling world we would renew, we must sing no ordinary song. Peals from a noisy gong will never do. In every breath, compassion must belong. Let this song our greatest hopes contain, laughter of a well-fed child, its tune, roofs over every heartbeat, its refrain, its harmony from peaceful cities hewn. Sing of joy while hammering each nail. Sing of hope while pulling every weed. So shall we sing together and prevail. May every alleluia bear a seed.
And now it's the time in our service when we get to greet and welcome each other. Now, we're still in the thick of this pandemic, so touchless greeting is our baseline. There are so many warm ways to say and signal hello. Some folks may be comfortable with more, but please just check before any contact. You can feel free to stand up and move around during greeting time, or if you're more comfortable, you can stay seated. And for you folks at home, this might be a great time to send a text or a brief email to someone on your heart. You all in the sanctuary are welcome to rise up and greet each other, and Aaron's music at the end will remind us that we do need to settle down for the rest of the service. I love hearing and looking at the good cheer that's in our sanctuary. It just feels great. For a covenant, well, our denomination doesn't have a set creed that we must believe in to belong. Instead, our individual congregation wrote a covenant to express how we hope to be and promise to be with each other and with the world. Please join me in saying our covenant together. We are a people of faith and hope. Together we covenant to strive to become our better selves, to honor both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and respond to systems of violence and oppression with the power of a love beyond belief. And now we have a treat.
I love your covenant. Each UU church has a different one. And yours is really beautiful. I hope you cherish it. You hold it well, it seems. I want to share a story for all ages today. As I was introduced earlier, I'll say it again in case anybody just signed on or joined us. I'm the Reverend Dr. Pippin Whitaker, and I'm also the Executive Director of the South Carolina UU Justice Alliance and the affiliated minister down in Columbia. The Justice Alliance is a brand new baby organization, really doing our official launch starting, well, yesterday. And we have 2 paid staff, and I work with my colleague, the Reverend Dr. Jean Harriet, who's a UU minister and recently returned. She's from South Carolina, and she's recently returned to South Carolina. She's the director of organizing and also co-founder. Here at the start of a new year and the start of a new effort for justice, I want to begin with this story that is looking back into history. This is a practice called Sankofa. It's an Akan, which is an ancient philosophical tradition rooted in the ethnicities in Ghana and the Ivory Coast. The Sankofa practice is to look back on the past in order to move forward, to use that wisdom for your future. So we began with a look at our justice history. This story is called The Children's Crusade, and it's written by Kate Rode. It's a true story. "What are we going to do?" asked Martin Luther King, Jr., the well-known American civil rights leader, as he sat with his friends in a meeting in the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama. Martin, who was trying to lead the black people of Birmingham in their struggle to end segregation, he was worried, he and his friends, that they were going to fail in their mission. Do you remember their mission in Birmingham? Nevertheless, he rose from his chair in the front of the group and he said, "Who will demonstrate with me tomorrow in a brave attempt to end segregation? Who will risk going to jail for the cause?" Often, 400 people would show up at meetings like this, but only 35 or so would volunteer or protest, and not all of those volunteers would actually show up the next day to march. Those who did would gather downtown and parade through the streets, carry signs, chant and sing, sending the message that segregation had to end. In Martin's day, segregation meant that black people were not allowed to do the same things or go to the same places as white people. Black people couldn't go to most amusement parks, swimming pools, parks, hotels, or restaurants. They had to go to different schools that weren't as nice as the schools for white kids. They had to use separate drinking fountains. They could get in big trouble for drinking out of the fountains marked for white people. They weren't allowed to use the same bathrooms. Often there was no bathroom they could use. They weren't even allowed to try on clothes. They weren't allowed to do these things that the white people could do. Black people didn't think that was fair at all, and some white people agreed with them, and in the 1950s and 60s, many thousands of people worked to end segregation. But in many places, especially in the southern part of the United States, segregation was the law. And if black people tried to get somewhere they weren't supposed to go, they could get arrested, beaten, and killed. So in the spring of 1963, Martin Luther King went to Birmingham, Alabama, one of the largest and most heavily segregated cities in the South, to bring people together to change the law. But the people were so scared. The sheriff in Birmingham was named Bull Connor. Anybody remember that name? And black people didn't know what Bull Connor might do to them if he caught them protesting. He didn't have a good reputation. Martin Luther King had already been to jail once, and others were afraid to follow him. Besides, they weren't sure protesting would do any good. Have you ever felt like protesting is just not really going to do any good? Martin, seeing that no one answered his call, again tried to inspire that group. "The struggle will be long," he said. "We must stand up for our rights as human beings. Who will demonstrate with me, and if necessary, be ready to go to jail for it?" There was a pause. Then a whole group of people stood up. Someone gasped. All the people that stood up, they were children. The adults told them, "Sit down," but they didn't. Martin Luther King thanked the children and told them he appreciated their offer, but he couldn't ask them to go to jail. They still wouldn't sit down. They wanted to help. That night, Martin talked with a close group of friends about the events of the day. "What are we going to do?" he asked. "The only volunteers we got were children. We can't have children protest." Everybody nodded except Jim Bevel. "Wait a minute," said Jim. "If they want to do it, I say bring on the children." "But they're too young," the others said. Then Jim asked this, "Are they too young to go to segregated schools?" "No." "Are they too young to be kept out of amusement parks?" "No." "Are they too young to be refused a hamburger at a restaurant?" "No." "Then they're not too young to want their freedom," said Jim. And that night, they decided that any child old enough to join a church was old enough to march. So they did. The children heard about that decision, and they told their friends, and when the time came for the children to march, 1,000 children, teenagers, and college students gathered. The sheriff arrested them and put them in jail. The next day, even more kids showed up, some of their parents and relatives too, and even more the next day and the next. Soon, lots of adults joined in. Finally, 1,000 children were locked up together in a children's jail, and there was no room for anybody else. Sheriff Connor did awful things to try to get the children and the other protesters to turn back. He turned on police dogs, loosed them, and allowed them to bite and attack people. He turned on fire hoses that were so strong they would pull the paint off a wall. He ordered the firefighters to point the hoses at the little children and roll them down the street. People all over the country and all over the world saw the pictures of this abuse, of this violence. And now the white people of Birmingham began to worry because the rest of the world did not think well of them. All over the world, people said bad things about their town. So they decided they might have to change things. And a short time later, the black people and the white people of Birmingham made an agreement to desegregate the city. Today, when people tell this story, many talk about Martin Luther King, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But we should also remember the thousands of brave children and teenagers whose courage helped to defeat Bull Connor and end segregation in Birmingham, end segregation in the rest of the country. I wonder, I asked earlier, have you ever thought that protests just wouldn't do any good? Have you ever thought that writing your senator here in South Carolina wasn't going to make any change in politics? Well, maybe you're right. I can't do much on my own either. And maybe you and me sitting in a room, we can't do much either. But what happens? What becomes possible when we open our hearts to the people in our gathering and the people not in our gathering who are the most silenced, the most ignored, the most pushed aside? The people most impacted by injustices. What happens if we put that experience in the center? What becomes possible in our lives then? I'll leave us with that idea.
Definitely something to think over. In a few moments, you'll be invited to come forward to our rippling bowl, if you wish, to place a stone or a shell in the common water bowl. The ripples sent out when we drop in stones and shells represent the sharing of joys and concerns. Joys shared ripple out and can grow, and sorrows shared are diminished. I'm going to place a stone and a shell to hold a space for those of you who are with us virtually. And at this time, we also invite you to place an offering in our bowl on the chalice table. We are a generous people, giving to our church of time and talent and treasure. And we've been outstanding in our social justice giving and work in 2021. We have a tradition of sharing our plate for a different social justice cause each month. A half of all the loose cash in all of any specifically designated gifts go to this cause. We just had a successful Share the Plate to help furnish an apartment for an Afghani family moving soon to the upstate. I'm sure we're going to get updates on that along the way. And now we're entering a new year full of new possibilities. Yes, us UUs across the state may be faced with a mountain of social justice challenges. They're just everywhere. Yes, we can feel overwhelmed by this pandemic, by the political divisiveness going on, and other things too. Our first 2021 Share the Plate is going to the South Carolina UU Justice Alliance. This alliance was formed just very recently, as you heard, but it was able to start due to a grant from the Unitarian Universalist Fund for Social Responsibility, which is really exciting that our organization got this grant. The Alliance will connect UUs across the state to build relationships, give us mutual support in times of need for local social justice work, and join in collective action for state-level change, and just expand our joy in general. So let's give generously to this Share the Plate. And you can now come forward for this time of sharing.
I know it hurts, it's hard to breathe sometimes. These nights are long, you've lost the will to fight. I will carry you. I know you can't remember how to shine. Your heart's a bird without the wings to fly. Is anybody out there? Can you take this weight of mine? Is anybody out there? Can you lead me to the light? You are not alone. I've been here the whole time, singing you a song. Ooh, and I will carry you, and I will carry you. You are not alone. I've been here the whole time, singing you a song. Ooh, and I will carry you. I will carry you. I will carry you. I know it hurts, it's hard to breathe sometimes.
I want to invite you to hold a little space for everything you're carrying, to take some silence and 3 deep breaths, not the ones that you rush through, but the ones that you take time to prepare for. You might want to put your hand on your heart too and really connect. 2021 was a year in between a hard thing and a lot of waiting, thinking things were going to be over, and then not over, and then over, and then not over. And didn't start out too well either, with a threat to our democracy. So let's just take a deep breath to hold how we feel about 2021. I want to invite you to take a second deep breath just to feel how you are feeling right now with everything that you shared. And a final deep breath to soak in some of the space of courage around you and coming to you through the digital airways. A breath for courage that we can still hope in 2022. Peace in your hearts. One of the greatest champions for human rights, for community rights, for lifting up all voices and perspectives was Mahatma Gandhi. He kind of pushed back on Mahatma and wasn't ever really sure if he deserved that title. It is an honorary. He wrote this, which has been paraphrased in a short phrase, but I want you to hear what he really said. He wrote this famous through the paraphrase message. We but mirror the world. All the tendencies present in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, then the tendencies of the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, using the gendered convention of the time, as a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change around him, towards him. This is the divine mystery supreme. A wonderful thing it is, and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do. Mahatma Gandhi. We need not wait to see what others do. I first moved to South Carolina back in 2011 for a social work professor job at the University of South Carolina. My husband Steve and I were UUs. I've been a UU since being a teen or a tween, and we came to South Carolina with our kids from Florida, and in Florida at the time they had a statewide action network that brought the voice of progressive religion to Florida politics. They were a statewide action network. Now, a lot of state action networks do more than just statewide advocacy now, but that's what they did. And upon arriving in South Carolina, Steve and I started wondering, why don't we have a UU statewide action network here in South Carolina? We sure seem to need one. Steve and I were too busy with 2 young children and another soon on the way, too busy to start anything on our own. But we did keep wondering and maybe whining a little bit and asking sporadically, why don't we have some kind of statewide action network here in South Carolina? And when we asked other UUs this question, even the regional folks, the answers were kind of consistent. We heard things like, well, the UU churches don't really do anything together in South Carolina. Okay. We also heard occasionally, not that rarely, well, there are other UU churches in South Carolina? For about 5 years, we kind of occasionally asked this question and ran up against the same kinds of answers and presented with this obstacle. Well, we just stopped. We were busy. And then we moved to DC for Steve's job and my ministerial internship, and we thought about other things for a while, including me getting to ordained ministry. And it's not an easy feat to get into preliminary fellowship, as some people can tell you. Then last year, we returned to South Carolina amidst the pandemic and my community ministry work, and I found myself with some time to spare amidst my community ministry schedule. And Steve and I returned to our familiar whine of, why don't we have a statewide action network here in South Carolina? And I realized, oh, I have a little time, and I need not wait to see what others do. Let's take a moment and reflect on what Gandhi's saying. We need not wait. The first time I encountered the idea is through that famous misquote that I bet some of you are familiar with. It's a famous paraphrasing, actually, that people mistook as a misquote. You may have heard it. Be the change you want to see in the world. It is a lovely sentiment. And it can come across as a little individualistic. If we aren't careful, be the change you want to see in the world. It could suggest that you just need to become the way you want other people to be, and that somehow, magically, that'll just propagate. But what if we really did that? If we were all just being the change in ourselves, we would perhaps end up in our own many versions of perfection. My perfect change and yours might not be the same. And if we're not careful, we might not be anywhere close to what our neighbors need us to be, what you need me to be. Be the change on your own. Without the context of Gandhi's wider teaching in life, can be really individualistic and discouraging. I don't know about you, but I have spent many years trying to be the change and have found myself to be an imperfect human being. Whether it is living a zero carbon footprint or bringing kindness to every interaction, even in that long line at the grocery store, or creating more justice for everyone, it is hard to really be that change. How are you feeling about being the change? It's challenging on any day, and it is a worthy challenge, but now it's downright exhausting these days. I bet many of you can relate to the experience. I've talked to so many UUs across the country, so many different congregations. UUs and entire congregations are faced with a triple whammy of spiritual exhaustion in social justice work especially. The pressures are mounting in economic inequality, social injustices, and the environmental crisis. National and global politics seem to still be backsliding into division and nationalism and fundamentalism. We are worn down, all of us, by the impact of this pandemic that just won't go away. So many looming obstacles in our path. The Reverend Ralph Waldo Emerson, that famous Unitarian Universalist, or Unitarian minister, actually, it was before that merger. He was also a transcendentalist and a famous author. He said this: "Nobody trips over mountains. It's the small pebble that causes you to stumble. Pass all the pebbles in your path, and you find you will have crossed the mountain." All these daunting obstacles we face, the way we feel right now, I wonder if it's a little bit like how the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. felt in that Birmingham church when nobody would rise. And then, what an obstacle, right? And then the children rise, and there's that pebble in his path. He and his colleagues were alone, and they couldn't see that they had companions until something happened. Jim Bevel points out that the larger society is hurting and ignoring these children. These children stand to lose more from continuing the status quo than all the adults in that room. And then he points out that the organizers shouldn't do what the wider society is doing and ignore the children again. He points out the moral problem in the wider society and how it's being mirrored in their justice work. It's hard to recognize how you're actually embodying part of the problem. But when they changed how they organized, when Reverend Dr. King said, "Oh, yes, I understand," and they brought the youth along and more youth joined, the whole world watched, and that is what changed everything. That is what changed everything at that point in the civil rights movement. They changed and opened up the realm of what was possible by saying yes to the people on the margins. Reverend Dr. King had studied Mahatma Gandhi. He knew well what he meant about inner work and outer work for justice. And I think that's how Reverend Dr. King was able to be so flexible and change how he did things. Gandhi warns that we each internalize the tendencies in our wider society. And he admonishes us to avoid recreating the same negative aspects of society in our own lives, in our own hearts as we do justice work. He was showing those who struggle for justice a way to find inner peace and become a better leader. Reverend Dr. King understood this well, and he wove it into the core tenets of his way of doing nonviolent resistance. We must allow our work for justice to flow from a place of integrity, authentic nonviolence, wider morality, mutuality, and inner peace. Inner peace with whatever would come, including for him, jail. Not because we're seeking inner perfection, but because we are finding a way towards inner peace so that we are a better leader for change, for collective action. That's what Gandhi was about. What are those tendencies of the larger society that are living in each of us, I wonder, that can get in the way of our values, in our daily lives, and in our justice work? It is hard to accept these when you notice them. As I began to imagine a statewide action network for South Carolina, I knew I must avoid those tendencies that get in the way of justice. Going it alone was not going to be the solution, because isolation was part of the pattern. Well, as soon as I started asking who else was interested in a network, I immediately met Reverend Dr. Jean Harriet, the UU minister I told you who recently returned to South Carolina, who also wanted to forge a network. And then I quickly heard about your very own Rick Hannenberg, who was finding out what were the possibilities of a network, and he connected us with your minister, Reverend Scott Neely. And we had meetings and conversations, and he took back these possibilities to your board. And before we knew it, your board said, hey, if you want to go for that startup grant, we'll support you as being a fiscal agent for that project so this thing can be possible. So here we are at the start of a new year in just the perfect place in South Carolina, because you've said yes to what is possible. And we're making more and more things possible together. I never could have imagined this back in 2011 when I started whining about a state action network in South Carolina. Because we reached out and asked what was possible and who might want to do something and what people needed, instead of asking what was in the way. We're moving and creating what is possible today. All of us in our lives and in our justice work can learn from Gandhi's deep teaching. What are those tendencies in the wider society that are turning out in your life and blocking you from your own values? For those tendencies that are in the way, Emerson says, pass all the pebbles in your path and you'll find you've crossed the mountain. Passing those pebbles is hard. Gandhi says, transform the ways in yourself and your closest relationships, those ways from the wider society that are blocking you. Change yourself and your orientation, and then you will find that a new path emerges before you. Thank you for being part of that new path. What a lesson for us to dwell upon in the new year. What obstacles are in our lives, mirrors of the larger society that are obscuring our values? May we all transform those and discover our new way ahead. For Jean and I, as we embraced this one challenge of isolation, we knew there was something deeper and harder that we had to overcome. We wanted to transform the way we imagined the South Carolina UU Justice Alliance. And Jean encapsulated this obstacle in our path by raising the same question again and again. How will we listen to the people most impacted by injustice? So from the beginning, we articulated our mission. It's not just to gather UUs together, but to gather us together in such a way that we center the experience of the people most impacted by injustice. So our vision is to build the alliance of South Carolina Unitarian Universalists, acting for justice and through partnerships that center the voices and authority of people experiencing injustice. The pattern in the wider society is to listen least to the folks impacted by injustice. The pattern of the wider society is to devalue what the people impacted hope for, what they need, what they do. We know deep in our souls that we have to transform the ways that we act, the ways that we plan in order to overcome these patterns. Because this is our vision, because we have specific strategies and plans in our grant. The proposal that we wrote, thanks to you acting as fiscal agent. We wrote the grant to the UU funding program, and they were excited about the possibility of a budding Justice Alliance in South Carolina, and they're waiting to see what awesome things come out of South Carolina. So as Ruth said, and I'm really happy to share that we got a 1-year startup grant from the UU funding program, Fund for UU Social Responsibility. A 1-year startup grant to begin this transformational launch. And my goodness, what a journey. What pebbles or nice gravel we have ahead of us. We envision that the UU Justice Alliance will provide mutual support for local action, local social justice action among UUs and partners in South Carolina. When you have something critical, wouldn't it be great if everybody around the state knew and could lend their support in the ways that they're able? Wouldn't you love to know that something dear to your heart is happening and emerging in somewhere like Aiken or Columbia or Newberry or Charleston or Myrtle Beach, and help in the ways that you can? Mutual support. But we'll also build connections, virtual meetings, just so you can get to know other folks and what they're doing around the state. And there'll be opportunities for gathering for statewide action. Maybe it's letter writing or calling a senator, and I know that's hard, but when you get up on a Zoom meeting and we're all taking turns calling, and then we come back together and we say what they said and we hear what everybody else said, it's kind of funny. And there's a joy in it. There is. So we can be together in this, and we will become stronger, and it will be joy on the way. We'll also build a diverse board, including at least 50% who identify as members of groups most impacted by injustice. We'll cultivate partners and that are organizations led and co-led by the groups most impacted by injustice. And we'll seek to hire staff as we have the capacity that also represent identities most impacted by injustice in South Carolina. Of course, all of this will require resources, and that will mean money. And so I am so grateful for your sharing and support of this amazing congregation and the South Carolina Justice Alliance. And if anybody wants to make any additional visionary gifts, we do have a matching grant, a $3,000 matching grant offered by the UU Fund for Social Responsibility. And at the first $3,000 that we raise in direct gifts, they will match it and double your gift of $1 or more. So all you have to do if you want to contribute is write a check to the church here, the UU Congregation of Spartan, or Church Spartanburg, but put the Justice Alliance in the memo line or SCUJA in the memo line. SCUJA is SCUUJA. I like acronyms you can say. It's my fun. Got to have something to entertain yourself, right? But we also need each of you and your experience and your partners. All of us have myriad identities and experiences, and people in our family and experiences in our bodies that are more privileged and less privileged. We have insight into injustice, every one of us. We need to hear from you because we know that is how we find the new way. When we are in relationship and receiving and giving with one another. We know deep in our hearts that none of us meant to bring justice or be the change on our own only. It's not only not possible, it isn't fun. So we want to learn from you and your partners. How can the voice of solidarity for progressive faith support your local needs? What are you hoping for? Where are you stuck? We want to encourage and support your local partnerships like Alianza Spartanburg, or a faith-based community organization like Direct Action and Research Training, who I think is starting a new chapter up in the upstate. And keep in mind, your experience is needed too. The work that you're doing with the fund, that work can help to inform and guide other UU churches who would love to do the same thing. So think of yourself as a vital bearer of wisdom to share with the state. We are so glad to be here because no one can be the change on their own, and who would want to? The habit we've inherited from our wider society in our personal lives and our justice work tends to keep us feeling alone and isolated. Alone, we get discouraged. We have small visions. We only barely nudge the status quo. We get exhausted. But with partners, finding delight in all of our successes and embracing each other in our challenges and struggles, that's how you stay in the work for justice. Together, we just imagine more than is possible alone. So as we begin the new year, let us turn our obstacles into pebbles on our path, traction on our way. Thinking about building relationships like the Reverend Dr. King did, that teach us to say yes to the voices most impacted by injustice. We hope that you will join us in an online or in-person gathering this year. On February 22nd, we'll start a bi-monthly meetup for UU social justice leaders. Whether you consider yourself a leader or not, I bet you're a leader. To build relationships, find out what folks are doing, and help us envision what the network becomes in the years ahead. Perhaps we'll meet up on a Zoom get-together for writing or calling or sending a social media message to our legislators. We'll laugh and maybe we'll cry, but together we will find more joy. Just sharing what one another is doing. I have to say, I know it's going to give you joy because I am talking to congregations around the state and I'm so overjoyed with what everyone is doing. There isn't an issue that we aren't working on. So check us out, scooja.org, SCUUJA.org. Sign up for our emails. Don't miss an opportunity to get together, find out what people are doing. You can also look us up on Facebook if you do Facebook. I only do Facebook for work. When we gather together with open hearts and minds, we do more than mirror that wider society. We are more than just mirrors of the wider society. When we get together and we listen deeply, especially to the people that are heard and witnessed the least, that is when we create our own light, and that shines back out on the society. That is how we change South Carolina politics. So thank you all. And I can't wait to learn from you and join with you as we imagine boldly and create justice more creatively. Let's get together, South Carolina, and shine our light for justice. Amen.
We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Whoa, so is life. Whoa. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain, spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. We are of the Spirit, truly of the Spirit, only can the Spirit turn the world around. Whoa, so is life a batiwa, so is life. Whoa, so is life a batiwa, so is life. Whoa, so is life a batiwa, so is life. Whoa, so is life a batiwa, so is life.
Oops. Well, Aaron, thank you for your beautiful music today. I feel like we're up for turning the world around. And thank you, Reverend Dr. Pippin, for sharing with us a way that we can put our hopes into action and to extinguish our chalice. Though we extinguish our chalice flame, we carry within us what we kindled: the light of inspiration, the warmth of compassion, the fire of commitment. May we bring these gifts into our lives and share them radiantly out in the world.
We have spent time together, and these holy moments give us strength to go down the winding road until we meet again. We have spent time together, and these